now you've gone from a career as an athlete in the sport of bodybuilding to the, quite literally one of the preeminent commentator. Now, there's a quote that says, if you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. Has changing the way you look at bodybuilding from a competitor to a commentator changed your view of bodybuilding at all?
That's an interesting question. I'm trying to think. No, I don't think so. I still look at bodybuilding with the same love and passion. I don't look at it any more negatively. It always really bothered me when bodybuilders would have like a career that was successful and they would do all these things. And then as soon as they retired, they would start shitting all over the fucking sport. That was always a very, very big issue for me. So it's not even that I consciously don't. It's not even like I'm conscious of people that do that, but even subconsciously, I don't have like a negative outlook on bodybuilding or like any different type of outlook on it. I look at it more, I dissect it more now because I'm also a promoter. So like I promoted shows for over a decade now. So, and this year we're promoting our first pro show. So when I look at bodybuilding, I look at it in terms of how can I make it better? But I guess the way I feel is now between being a commentator, promoter versus a bodybuilder is I feel like I have an avenue now to make change. So because, and this is probably not totally accurate, but I feel like because 100,000 people a week watch my podcast, I feel like it's important for me to be honest about bodybuilding, but also promote bodybuilding. So like when I say things like, this is a big deal for me that people made a big deal of, like, oh, I wish the prejudging still had a black backdrop and not all this LED lighting because the bodybuilders look better with just black curtain. So this is like a big thing for me. So I'm like, I feel like if I keep saying it, enough people get behind it, then maybe it'll happen. So I feel like maybe that's something that I like, that's a way I look at bodybuilding, more in a critique, but not in a negative sense, just in a like, how can we make this better for everybody? Or like, I've said things like, I feel like there should be standardized lighting at all the shows. Some shows are really dimly lit. Some shows are just not lit right at all. The bodybuilders look worse. If we have a product on stage, we should probably make it look the best we can, right? So I feel like as a commentator, podcaster, promoter, I look at bodybuilding more from, I try and look at it from the public's view, whereas a bodybuilder, I was looking at it strictly from the stage. So that's, I think that would be the only difference is I try and see what the fans see now because I am a fan.
Do you feel a responsibility? Because if you look at the major sports, the big four in North America, Major League Baseball, basketball, ice hockey, and football, they all have players associations. Mm-hmm. They all have representatives. Mm-hmm. Do you see yourself as almost like, and maybe not directly, but in looking at decisions like this to make the sport not only better for the consumer, but hey, I'd love to not be illuminated by purple lights in Alicante and blue lights in Vancouver. Like this is insanity. Yeah. Do you feel like, or a responsibility of sorts of like, hey, you know what, I the only way I can pay it back is to pay it forward, and with the platform I have, I'd like to be able to make the change so that we see bodybuilding going forward. Do you kind of see yourself in uniquely situated as like speaking on behalf of bodybuilders for bodybuilding?
I don't want to go that far because I'm definitely not that guy, but I will say part of the reason I started the podcast, and this goes back to the whole, like, people think I started because of business. The reason I started the podcast is because people were talking about bodybuilders that didn't actually know what the fuck they were talking about. So I felt it was my responsibility, or I made it my responsibility, to bring bodybuilders on so they could talk for themselves. And it was funny because I would see in the comment sections, oh, I didn't know Cedric felt like this, or I didn't know Branch felt like that. I didn't know Branch grew up living in his car with his mom for a period of time. I didn't know. And then people would become fans of these people that they had no idea who they were. They only knew that they were jacked and they fucking lifted like animals. So I felt like it was my responsibility to kind of pull the curtain back on personalities, which would bring people closer to bodybuilding and humanize bodybuilders. And then people would go, oh, you know what? They're not bad people. They have the same fucking sense. Like Bro Chat, for example. Sure, it's a bodybuilding show. We designate a segment of that show to covering a show or talking about a contest or placings or whatever. But the rest of that show is us just being guys on purpose. Because I want people watching to go, oh, these guys got problems with their wives, They have anxiety issues. They have health issues. They have fun like the rest of us. They fucking drink. They fucking do drugs. They whatever. Like, we talk about everything, but that's on purpose, because I'm like, I feel like it's my responsibility to go to everybody. Hey, bodybuilders aren't fucking monsters. Yeah, sure, we look like monsters and we're intimidating, but look, we all have the same sense of humor you do. We all have the same problems you do. And I feel like to a certain degree, if I've brought anything to bodybuilding, it's just been to humanize these guys and make normal people feel connected. And that's probably the biggest thing I'm proud of. As far as speaking for bodybuilders, I definitely don't think I do. If I had my wish, it would be that there would be more than one person, and it would be a group of people, whether it be 4, 6, 8, whatever, that spoke for bodybuilders. Would I love to be part of that? Sure. I think I have a good idea of what bodybuilders go through, whether it be health-wise or mental health, like all those things. So yeah, I'd love to be part of something like that. I just don't know how that would work. Like, everybody talks about it, but nobody really knows how that would all get started and what position the IFBB would take on that. Like, it's kind of just something people talk about. But yeah, I don't think I speak for bodybuilders, but it would be cool if there was a council of sorts.
You talk about your role in kind of humanizing bodybuilders to like the rest of the world, and like bridging that gap between like the non-bodybuilding community who might look at them in, you know, maybe a less than favorable light, or just a less than transparent or honest light. Do you see yourself also playing a role for bodybuilders in their transition out of bodybuilding and showing them what that looks like? Because, you know, like you said earlier, when you in 2017, you're not sure if you're going to compete again. You know, you set yourself up well. I don't think anyone would have the audacity to say that like you were lucky. You set yourself up well. You leveraged social media well. You had good sponsors. You placed well. You were a good bodybuilder.
Yeah.
Do you find now? I mean, most recently we just had Ian on the show a month or so back, and he had his announcement. Do you find yourself now fielding a lot of questions about life after bodybuilding, seeing as you probably have done it most true and successful of any bodybuilder in recent history?
I think I did more when it was closer to my retirement. Okay. I think people have seen me, you know, being retired for so long now that it's not as much. But I see, and I can tell because I see, like, when Guy Cisternino retired, people were like, "Oh, what's retirement like?" I'm like, you can't ask somebody 2 months after they retire. It's not the same.
Yeah.
Like, nothing's changed. And, you know, Ian's just retired. People are like, "Ian, you're still big." And he's like, "I retired 2 weeks ago."
Yeah, I didn't hit the small switch.
So it's like, people think when you retire, there's all of a sudden this, like, it doesn't work like that. Even when I retired, I was fine. It was like 3 or 4 months later, I was like, wait a minute. That shit's gone now. And you don't realize it's gone. And then it's gone. And you're like, oh, fuck. But, you know, it doesn't hit you like the first day after. But I will say that Ian said to me, so when Ian retired, I asked him specifically, I said to Ian, I said, do you think that if you were hanging out with guys that weren't retired, like, let's say you're still, because he hangs out with me, Paul, and Mike. We're all older and retired. I was like, if you were hanging out with guys your age, like if you were hanging out with like Nick and Justin and Brett and, like, you know, all these younger guys that you know, do you think you would have retired? He's like, yeah. He's like, if anything, you guys, he goes, I didn't retire because I'm hanging out with you. I retired because you guys showed me that it was okay. That kind of felt good.
That's got to be pretty powerful, because I mean, you talk about if he hung out with, you know, the younger generation more. His brother-in-law is the most notable bodybuilder since Schwarzenegger.
I know.
And so if there's a pull to keep him in, it's, you know, across the kitchen table. So for you guys, you know, for Mike and Paul Lozon up on, I'm just kidding about Paul. I figure it wasn't.
Careful. Paul's got a very, like,
very
loyal fan base.
Yeah, very fragile pec, though. I'll fuck up your other. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to get across the border anymore. That's going to be. I figure it wouldn't be fitting if I didn't talk shit about Paul. I'm going to text him after to apologize. But, like, that speaks volumes that you could take a guy so closest to the paramount of the sport, and, you know, through, like, talking about should you dry your gooch or not on the internet, be like, you know what, there's something to this hang. I'm gonna hang it up. I want to talk more about this. This is where I need to be.
You know, I tried to talk him out of it. I did.
Drying his gooch? No.
Yeah, I said leave it wet. No. No, me and Ian have become very close, and I consider him one of my best friends, and we are very similar. And I know people don't know that because Ian's me when I was 32. People don't know that, Fouad, because they know me from the podcast, being the pizza, McDonald's eating fucking old guy. But we are very similar in a lot of ways. And so when he told me he wanted to retire, I was like, is this an anxiety thing? Because I've been there. Because I have been in the place where I was like, I need to retire. It's like, this isn't, it's not for me, and and like, but for me, it was more an anxiety thing. So I had to grill him about it first, because I know he deals with that himself a little bit. So I did. I grilled him about it. I'm like, is this something you're going to regret? Is this something like, are you sure you're not just like worried, or you putting too much pressure on yourself, blah, blah. He said to me vehemently, he was like, no. He's like, this is actually nothing to do with my anxiety. He's like, I just know. So after grilling him for a day, the next day I called him and I said, look, I just want you to know that I just had to do that, but I'm your friend and I support you and I'm actually happy for you, whatever you decide. And then he was like relieved. And I think everybody around him kind of said the same thing. And he told me that he's like, you guys have showed me that you can still have a life in bodybuilding without competing. And he goes, that's kind of what I want. He's like, I still love to train. I still want to be in the gym. I still want to do this stuff. And I still want to be on the podcast. He's like, I just don't know if I love competing. He goes, I won Toronto. And he goes, but it didn't feel like I won. He's like, it didn't feel like anything. He goes, so I think that kind of told me like I'm finished. But I guess the point of it all is, it made me happy for him to be able to look and go, oh, I can do something else, because nobody had that for me. Because most bodybuilders, if they don't have an outlet, will just keep bodybuilding, because they're like, what the fuck else am I going to do with my life? And that was me. Like I probably could have retired when I was 36, because my best year was 35. I won a couple shows. 36, I could feel it changing. And I probably could have retired, but I didn't. I'm like, how am I going to make money? I'm like, what am I going to do? I'm like, I'm making 6 figures. I'm like, I work out for a living. I'm like, maybe you're just complaining. Maybe you're just being a pussy. Just shut the fuck up and make your 6 figures, because nobody else is making 6 figures to go work out. So I kept doing it, even though my health wasn't the best. Like my kidneys had already started to change. And I was like, yeah, but I got to make this money, and I can't just leave. So it kind of made me happy to be in the position to show somebody else, even though Ian's healthy, like he's totally fine all around, physically, internally, but mentally he wasn't there. But it made me feel good to give somebody permission. Not that I gave him permission, but that he could see that, oh, there's more, and there's other shit, and you'll still be fine, and people will still follow you for your personality. So yeah, it felt good to be in that position.